This is the second week that we will be talking about John. Uh, with that, it might be important to understand that John was an important individual within the gospel. So as we go through this today, and as we went through it last week, let us focus on who John was and why John was so important. So would you be willing to be a martyr for Jesus? This is a difficult question to answer because we don't know how we would react if we were put in that kind of situation. As a soldier, and as been somebody who's been to combat, sometimes you ask yourself before going into combat, how will I respond? Will I be brave and go forth and do my duty? Nobody really knows until they actually get there. A martyr, of course, is a person who has been killed because of his or her belief. It's usually a Christian belief or a religious belief. We all know of the first century Christians being martyred in the Roman Colosseums, crucified on a cross and lying on Roman roads. But every century has known Christian martyrs, people who remain faithful in the face of danger and who were killed because of their belief. That sort of thing still takes place today, where Christians are being killed for their belief. Today in China, Iran, Indonesia, India, and a bunch of other countries where Christians are being martyred. But martyrdom for us in the United States seems foreign because, for the most part, in the United States, Christians have been safe. So martyrdom is not something that we think of because in our country, we are safe, that we can have our beliefs. And when we're not in a COVID situation, we can go to our churches without worrying about persecution. But would you be willing to be a martyr for Jesus if that wasn't the case? I doubt that many of us would welcome that prospect, although there are people with that kind of flair or dramatic tending to want to be a martyr, to glorify themselves for the cause. There may be people who would be happy enough to be a martyr, but most of us would not be happy to do that. Truth be told, I'd prefer not to be a martyr for Jesus, not to die for my faith. I prefer living for Jesus instead of dying for Jesus. But if the occasion was to arise that I am focused to choose between life without Jesus or the death with Jesus, I would hope I had the strength to choose death and to be a martyr for Jesus. But the word martyr doesn't always mean dying for the sake of a principle. The word martyr comes from the Greek word martynia, which means witness, like a witness in a court. Martynia, a witness without bearing. It's a testimony in trial. His idea is, of course, the same as today, that a witness testifies to something that he or she might know. If you see an accident, for instance, you might be asked to testify in court, to tell the judge and the jury what you have seen, what you know about the accidents from your personal experience. The purpose of such testimony, of course, is to help the judge and the jury, who are not there to see the accident and to assess what had happened, so that the judge and the jury can render a fair and just verdict. Most of us would be happy enough, or at least willing to serve as a witness in a trial, if we have perfect personal knowledge of an incident or crime. So it is not unusual or dangerous to be a martyr, a witness in a trial. But Christians bearing witness to their faith were living dangerously in the first century. And Christians bearing witness to their faith today sometimes still find themselves living dangerously. That hasn't generally been the case in this country. But we shouldn't assume that it will not always be safe to be a Christian here. We should give serious thought to what we will do in the event that it becomes dangerous to become or being a Christian, because it could happen. The word martyr, which originally means witness, becomes a word that speaks of dying for one's faith, because so many Christians died for their faith. They maintained their faith, witnessed to their faith, even under persecution, and many were killed. But the time has not yet come that we have to choose between life and death. We don't have to choose between Christ or death with him. No one is holding us at gunpoint, demanding that we renounce our faith. Thank God for that. While Christ has not yet called us to martyrdom in the sense that we must die for our faith. He has called us every day to be a martyr in the sense that we must witness to our faith, that we need to be like John the Baptist did, that he pointed people to Jesus, that we tell him that Jesus is the light, that we must make the way straight for the Lord. The irony, of course, is that many of us who imagine that we could find the courage to die for our faith can't seem to find the courage to invite our neighbors to church with us. Or perhaps we don't realize how important it is for us to do that, to let our friends and neighbors and family know that we are Christians, and to invite them to our church, even on Zoom, to take overtly the steps to win them to Christ. We believe that the world, when the world has told us that our neighbor's faith is none of our business, we need instead to believe that Jesus, when he told us to do that. We live in a world where people outside the church are not likely to hear much about Jesus unless we say something. School teachers aren't permitted to talk about their faith. The Christmas music that used to speak of Jesus now speaks of reindeer and snowmen. Many Christmas cards say Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas, presuming because we might offend our non-Christian friends by saying Merry Christmas. Why have we let the world convince us that we should hide the light of our faith under a bushel? Why have we let the world convince us that we should hide our lamp in the cellar instead of putting it on the top of the hill where it can be the light to all? So it can be the light for all to see it. Why have we been so willing to roll over and play dead when everyone says you shouldn't do that because you might offend someone? Now, I'm not suggesting that we become offensive Christians. That's not at all what I'm trying to say. In a sense, we should be out there showing the people. I don't believe that we need to be offensive Christians. I don't believe that we need to be timid either, to be hesitant. We need to be less fearful. I do believe that we need to be a more positive witness for our Savior, Jesus Christ. I'm simply suggesting that we open and encourage our faith, that we let other people know that our faith is important to us, that it helps us, and that it might help others. While writing this sermon, I tried to find some stories about witnessing to Jesus. The problem was that there's so many stories that were so dramatic that most of us could never imagine ourselves in such a situation. In one story, which was a true story, a bus driver was involved in an accident, and the youth pastor was engulfed in flames. As he was dying, kids on the bus heard him speaking joyfully to Jesus, saying that he was coming home. That was a powerful witness to the kids, but I hope none of us ever have the opportunity to make that sort of witnessing. But we can let people know that we are Christians. We can keep a Bible at our desk at work. Of course, if we do that, we need to act like Christians. We need to watch our language. We need to treat people respectfully. We need to be concerned about the welfare of those around us. And as we need to invite our unchurched friends to come to church with us. First, we need to make acquaintances. We need to make friends. Then we need to invite them to come to church with us. Not everyone will respond, but some will. In some cases, they might even actually come to church and start living the lives. And then that might change their lives and the lives of their children. How many of you are Christians today in part because someone invited you to their church? Do not tell me that it doesn't work, that it doesn't change lives. It changes many people's lives. I did come across another story that I would like to share with you. In this story, it comes from Jimmy Carter in his book, Source of Strength. Jimmy, or President Carter, tells about a Southern Baptist convention that he was invited to address while he was still president. It was a huge assembly, over 17,000 delegates. There were 3 speakers there that day. One was Billy Graham, the other was a truck driver, and the other was Jimmy Carter, or President Carter. Each was given 5 minutes to speak. Billy Graham was slated to speak first. He stood up and began his short but powerful speech. President Carter was seated next to the truck driver while Graham was speaking. The truck driver was shaking in his boots at the prospect of giving a speech in front of such a huge crowd. He confided to the president that he had never given a speech and said that he didn't think he could do it. When Billy Graham sat down, the truck driver pulled himself to his feet and made his way to the podium. He stood there silently for a moment. Then he reached for a glass of water. Finally, he began to speak. Mumbling into the microphone, he said, "I was always a drunk. Didn't have any friends. The only people I knew were people like me, who hung around bars in the town where I lived." And then he related how someone told him about Christ. One thing led to another, and the drunk became a Christian. His life began to change, and he began to become excited about the possibilities of going out and spreading the word about Jesus. He began to share his faith with others, but wasn't sure how to go about it. He spent a great deal of his life in the bars and felt comfortable there. So he went there to the bars and began to talk about Jesus to his old friends. Now the bartender tried to stop him because he didn't like it. He felt that it was bad for his business. But the truck driver did not stop. His old friends hardly knew what to think. But some began to talk to him and asking him questions. The truck driver said, "At first they treated me like a joke, but I kept up with the questions. And when I didn't have a complete answer, I went and got the answer and came back to them." He concluded his speech by saying, 14 of my friends became Christian. Then he sat down. President Carter said the truck driver's speech, of course, was the highlight of the convention. I don't believe anyone there will ever forget that 5 minutes. They probably won't remember what Billy Graham or Jimmy Carter had to say. Our gospel lessons today from John the Baptist was sent by God to testify to the light, to testify about Jesus. So was the truck drivers, and so are we. It will help if we do what Jesus has told us to do, what you hear every Sunday, what I preach about: to love God, to love our neighbors, to care for those who are hungry, who are thirsty, or sick, or in prison. It will help if we become that kind of person for our coworkers. if we are honest and if we are kind. It will help if we find ways to let people know that we are Christians. It will help if we will invite people and neighbors to come to church with us, even on Zoom. It will help if we will pray for guidance so that we know just how the Spirit would use us to witness for Christ. But however we set out to accomplish the task, God sends us here to testify to the light. Let us not forget that. Let us not forget to do it every day, to be the light of Christ wherever Christ may send us. Shalom and amen.